Planning a trip to Australia can feel daunting. I get it. It's so far, like very far from most places. And it's massive. Hi, I'm Sarah, and welcome to my channel, Travel for Every Budget. Today, we're going to go over just some of the basics of planning a trip to Australia for anyone who's maybe a beginner at planning trips or just feeling a little bit overwhelmed with the massive size of Australia. I've been blessed enough to go about 4 times, and I am hoping to make it again at some point before my nephew enters his teen years. So with Australia fresh in my mind and it being one of my favorite destinations that I've been to, I wanted to help anyone else who's looking to plan a trip. I'm hoping to make this a bit of a series for Australia, and I am going to look more through the lens of trips that are weeks, not months long. However, I have done both. I've traveled the whole east coast of Australia and Tasmania over the course of their winter months, and I've gone for 10 days and done Sydney and the Blue Mountains. So whatever your goals, let's plan a trip to Australia. So let's start with getting to Australia. The travel time to Australia is long, and coming from the east coast of the United States, it's a very, very long. However, in some ways, the flight is easier than crossing the Atlantic. Hear me out. I know it's about 5 hours longer, but by the time you take off from the west coast of the US, you are exhausted because it's so late. This can make it easier to sleep, or at least it helped me. For Australia from the US, direct flights will be out of Los Angeles or other major west coast cities. If you feel comfortable, booking tickets separately can save you money. Try different searches to see if that can work for you. Just double check that you are booking flights to and from the same connecting airport, and that you give yourself enough time to make your connecting flight. Now let's talk about the length of your trip. From my experience, I don't recommend going for less than 10 days if you are coming from anywhere other than a major West Coast city that offers a direct flight to Australia. Going to Australia, you lose a day passing the international date line, and you spend a day traveling. So if you take off on the 1st of the month, you arrive in Australia on the 3rd. Already, your 10-day trip is 8 and you haven't even started. 2 to 3 weeks is a good time for a solid trip. The challenge from here will be deciding what destinations in Australia to visit within that time frame. Now let's discuss the size of Australia. It is massive. It is the same size as the continental United States. So if you are a fellow resident of the US and someone asked you if they could visit all the major sites and cities in 2 to 3 weeks, you'd immediately tell them to narrow down their itinerary. The same is true for Australia. Here's an idea of where the top recommended places to see in Australia sit on the map. For some perspective, a flight from Cairns to Perth is similar to a flight from New York to Los Angeles. So let's review some questions to ask yourself to help you narrow down your choices. What are my top places to see? What type of weather do I want to experience based on the time of year? And what is my budget? What are your top places to see? First difficult job is to narrow down the top spots for your trip. For instance, let's say your top 2 choices are the Great Barrier Reef and Uluru. You plan your extra flights to these 2 destinations, and since you are flying in and out of Sydney, you can plan for Sydney as well. That is 3 destinations and doable for 2 weeks in Australia. Perhaps you want to do Sydney and Melbourne. Each city has plenty to explore, and you can add the Great Ocean Road to your Melbourne itinerary and the Blue Mountains to your Sydney portion. That's a fun and relaxed couple of weeks. Or add Tasmania and cut down on days in one or both of those cities. The hardest part in planning a trip is deciding what to do that doesn't rush you too much and still allows you time to enjoy your trip. Next, we want to consider what type of weather do you want to experience based on the time of year. One way to help you narrow down your options is considering the weather. As a reminder, the southern hemisphere is opposite to the northern hemisphere, so their winter is during our summer, and for warmer temps, head north while the south is cold. If you are heading to Australia in their winter, the Great Barrier Reef will be pleasant while Melbourne and Tasmania will be cold. If you want to avoid the cold, focus on Queensland, the Outback, or Western Australia, as temperatures are mild during winter months and might actually be more pleasant than the summer heat. So what is your budget? The least favorite aspect of planning any trip, but a requirement for most of us. Flights easily take up the bulk of your budget, but you can find ways to save in other areas if need be. Australia has a range of accommodation options, with some areas having more options than others. If you can't afford one area, just switch gears and research another. You might find that getting to Uluru is pricey, but Melbourne is easier and includes more hotel options. The trip will still be wonderful, and the budget can be used as a tool to narrow down your choices rather than a requirement that just suffocates the fun. Now that you have started thinking through this, it's time to finally decide on where to go. This can be both the fun part and the hard part, so check my description below for links to more resources and inspiration. Before you book anything though, you will need to apply for a visa to visit Australia. I provided a link to the official instructions below. Once accepted, it will be valid for a year for up to 3 months of travel at a time. And when you do finally touch down in the land down under, don't take any nuts, seeds, or dried fruit. So basically, make sure you leave any trail mix snacks that you brought on the plane. I didn't know this on one of my trips and I got a stern talking to. I've linked to the website on what is and is not allowed if you want to research prior to your trip. Well, there you have it, your beginner's guide to planning an Aussie adventure. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit the like button. I hope you have the best time on your trip to the land down under. Thank you for watching and happy travels.